Today, let's talk about navigation. The goal here is to learn how to manage your navigation project in Spark. For your information, the navigation can be used only by Cruzr robots from UBTECH Robotics. So here in Spark, click on your menu. Then, as you can see here on the right, you have your menu with two applications, and on the left, you have a tab called Navigation. Click on it, and then let's enable the navigation. Now the second step is to attach a map. So we click here, then we select the map that has been recorded by Cruzr, we add it, and as you can see here we have the preview of the map of the building where the robot will navigate. Now we will add our first place directly on the map. Let's imagine we are in a medical clinic and we want the robot to bring people to the waiting room, to the nursery, or to the radiology. Now let's add our first place. So we click here and we will define the first place. That could be the entrance of the building. So here we will define this place as a default place. So the robot will start the navigation here by welcoming people. If we zoom in, we can change the orientation of the robot. And then we can add our second place. That could be the waiting room. So let's put the waiting room here, for example. And the radiology. So now we have three places: the main entrance, the waiting room, and the radiology. Now let's see how to add virtual walls directly on the map. In some cases, you don't want the robot to go in a specific place in the building, or you have some difficulties with obstacles. So you click here, edit the virtual walls, and then you can add virtual walls directly on the map. And then to remove a wall, you can click on the green line and then you can delete it. And then you can save the walls. Now let's configure the robot's behavior. So first, let's select the waiting room. So here you have each step of the navigation process. So let's configure the first step, trigger the navigation. So we click here. Then let's define a keyword, which is waiting room. So people would just have to say, I want to go to the waiting room, and the robot will know exactly which point of interest it is. So then we can select an image to illustrate the point of interest. And here below, if we enable the ask confirmation, the robot will always propose to go there. So here we can edit the title. And the robot speech. So of course, you can add a Cruzr phrase, a body animation, or a sound. If you click here, you can see that you have some alternatives that have been already defined by default. So you can keep them or add your own. Now let's move to the next step, when navigation starts. So here this step is when the robot is moving toward a location. So as you can see here, if we select manual, you can edit the default content. So in our case, let's go to the waiting room. Otherwise, the robot will play one of these default sentences. Now let's click here on Show More Behaviors. So as you can see here, we can configure other robot behaviors. So let's select navigation not available, for example. Each step of the navigation process has some default content already configured in Spark. So as you can see here, if we select manual mode, there are some default sentences already configured. And it is the same for each step of the navigation process. Then let's move to the navigation interruption. So here, for some reasons, the navigation is stopped by someone, for example, and the user will have the choice to return to menu, see all places, or ask the robot to continue the ride. Then we can take a look at the section below when the navigation restarts. So of course you can configure this behavior or keep the default one. Now let's move to the next step when the destination is reached. So here in our case, we will define when the robot arrived at the waiting room. So here, if you click on more options, you can configure the tablet display. Then we can move to the next step when the destination is unreachable. So here you have a default sentence and tablet display already configured. So we can keep this one and move to the next step. So here we can configure what the robot should do at the end of the navigation. In our case, the robot will start the application menu, then we'll wait for the end of interaction before going back to the default place, which is the main entrance in our medical clinic use case. But at the opposite, we can ask the robot to wait indefinitely to this place, or we can even ask him to go to somewhere else. So in our case, we can ask the robot to go to the radiology right after the waiting room. So we are done with the configuration of this first point of interest. So of course you're gonna have to repeat the process for each place. Now let's move to the next tab, the default values. So here you can find all the default values that will be played by the robot as default when some of these sections are not set in navigation place. It means that when you didn't configure a specific robot behavior for one of these steps, the robot will play automatically the ones configured in the default values in Spark. Now let's move to the next step, the scheduler. Thanks to the scheduler, we can define to which place the robot returns according to what time it is. So here in our use case, we want the robot to be at the waiting room from 10 to 11 a.m. Then in the afternoon, we want the robot to be at the radiology from 2 to 4 p.m. And in the meantime, the robot will be at the main entrance, which is his default place. So now we are done with our navigation project, so we can save our changes. And finally, let's take a look at where we can use the navigation in Spark. So you can use the navigation anytime while the menu is displayed on the robot's tablet, but you can also use the navigation inside an application. Let's take an example with the receptionist application. So at the conclusion of the receptionist, as you can see here, we can set next action and select a point of interest that have been defined in our navigation module in Spark.